I'm now going to move on to the next debate. Jonathan Edwards to move the motion. Order.
I beg to move that this House has considered the future of the Dyfed Powys police helicopter. May I firstly welcome the Minister to his place and congratulate him on his appointment following the election. The helicopter is a prominent and vital asset for policing the communities of Carmarthen, Pembrokeshire.
To allow the room to clear, so actually I can hear what he's saying. So perhaps, like I say, I've been reappointed, not appointed. I was in this role before the election.
Members, order. Can members leave the room quietly, please? Jonathan Edwards.
Thank you, Mr Crosby. The helicopter is a prominent and vital asset for policing the communities of Carmarthen, Pembrokeshire, Ceredigion and Powys. That, of course, can be said about every police helicopter in service. However, Dyfed Powys is a special place, the largest geographical police force in Wales and England, where the landscape is dominated by some of the most stunning mountainous terrain in the whole of these isles. Dyfed Powys covers around half of Wales and serves a population of around 500,000. It has unique policing challenges, and the helicopter is a vital tool in policing operations. It is used for surveillance, vehicle pursuits, for gathering intelligence and evidence, and the use of aerial photography. It searches for missing people, suspects and vehicles. It transports specialist teams around the police force area and is used for casualty evacuation. The police helicopter has been prominent in our communities for many, many years. Indeed, Dyfed Powys was the first in the UK to operate a police helicopter. The reason for my debate today, Mr Crosby, is because under current plans from the National Air Police Service, or NPAS, our dedicated helicopter will be lost from the 1st of January next year, and our state-of-the-art helicopter base, recently opened at a cost of millions of pounds, will be closed. As the Minister will be aware, NPAS is the result of the Police Collaboration Specified Function Order 2012, and a statutory instrument which instructs police air support in Welsh and English forces to be exercised in accordance with a single police collaboration agreement. A crucial point at this stage of my speech is that this is a Wales and England measure, as policing is devolved in Scotland and Northern Ireland. If policing was devolved in the case of Wales, as my party advocates, it is highly unlikely that we'll be having this argument. Returning to the order, it does not dictate the number of aircrafts or bases to be used by the new NPAS service. This cuts to the fundamental reason as to why I'm holding today's debate. In 2010, 31 helicopters were used in policing operations around Wales and England from 29 bases. In 2011, 30 helicopters were operating from 28 bases. After consultation with police authorities and chief constables, NPAS's business plan was amended to recommend a delivery model of 23 aircrafts plus 3 spare from 23 bases. In November 2014, NPAS announced it would operate 25 aircraft from 22 bases. Crucially, in its prepared communication briefing last November, which I'm not completely sure was meant for the public to see, NPAS said its 22 base model was the right one needed to deliver the operational capability needed for the public in England and Wales. Just 3 months on from that, NPAS then announced it would be operating 19 helicopters and 4 fixed-wing aircraft from just 15 bases. Mr Crosby, the creation of NPAS and the model it intends introducing next year will see the number of active bases in Wales and England halved and the number of helicopters reduced by almost 40%. When the Minister responds, I would particularly welcome the Minister's comments on the merits of the current 15-base model. If NPAS itself had previously said that a 22-base model was the right one for the public. Accompanying the recent NPAS announcement to reduce its bases around Wales and England were maps of proposed future coverage. These show great swathes of the Dyfed Powys force area only being reachable after a minimum of 30-minute travel time from bases at St Athan or Bristol. You don't have to be a detective to work out that extended travel times will significantly diminish the safety and the service available to my constituents. This additionally flies in the face of one of NPAS's main objectives, which is to reach 97% of the population within 20 minutes. To add insult to injury, NPAS proposes 1 fixed-wing aircraft to serve the whole of Wales, in addition to the West Midlands and the southwest of England. This is completely at odds with the findings of the fixed-wing aircraft trial that took place in Dyfed Powys in May 2012, which concluded such an aircraft had very few positive features when operating in the Dyfed Powys terrain, spending 80% of its time manoeuvring and only 20% locating lost or injured individuals. The main drawback cited was his inability to land and hover. The crew at Pembrey base is not just made up of pilots. The crew is made up of trained police officers who often, metaphorically speaking, swap their aviation hats for the police hats when they land the helicopter to help catch criminals, find lost persons or assist the injured. Such tasks would be impossible without our dedicated service for the force. The various maps produced by NPAS imply that a fixed-wing aircraft will be based in Llandilo, in my constituency, for which they use to estimate average flying times to the rest of Wales. What the maps don't tell you is that this fixed-wing aircraft will be based in the Midlands. For the maps to be accurate, the aircraft will have to be constantly encircling Llandilo, refuelled in mid-air when required before being dispatched, which is plainly ridiculous. In other words, the arguments being put forward by NPAS to justify its new enhanced coverage is purely hypothetical and deeply misleading. The aim of NPAS, of course, is to centralise police air support services to cover the whole of Wales and England. Police forces that signed up to NPAS hand over their assets for the promise of increased coverage and reduced costs, as the Minister will no doubt seek to argue in his reply. Unfortunately, that hasn't been the case. NPAS has been tasked with finding efficiency savings of 37%. That was 23% in 2012 and now a further 14%. NPAS is simply unable to deliver what it promised to individual police forces when they signed up. The assurance of providing a more efficient and effective service with increased coverage is undeliverable. Indeed, the opposite is happening. A simple internet search will tell the Minister of the concerns police commissioners and the public throughout Wales and England are raising about the lack of cover their forces are witnessing since joining NPAS. We're told in Dyfed Powys that we will enjoy 24-hour coverage under NPAS in contrast to the 12-hour-a-day coverage at present. I understand that on only 13 occasions has a helicopter been needed in Dyfed Powys outside of the usual operating times over the last 4 years. That averages at just 3 times a year, with support always being available from neighbouring forces, a voluntary air support service, if you like. There is minimal demand for a 24-hour service in Dyfed Powys, and the seemingly undeliverable promise of such coverage cannot make up for the loss of our local dedicated service. The deal between NPAS and the Dyfed Powys Police, announced by our Police Commissioner in November, set out how Dyfed Powys Police would pay around £890,000 a year to join NPAS instead of the circa £1.1 million a year the force pays out to run and maintain our dedicated helicopter. The intention to restructure the service in order to save money is honourable, but it cannot happen if the level of that service is diminished. Maps produced by aircraft pilots who actually operate police helicopters suggest the level of air support for priority calls in my area of Dyfed Powys would be completely non-existent within a 20-minute timescale. Not only is this at odds with what NPAS promises, but there is strong argument to suggest that instead of Dyfed Powys saving around £200,000 by joining NPAS, it will be paying around £900,000 a year for having little or no emergency coverage at all. This is, of course, without discussing the state-of-the-art Pembrey helicopter base, only opened a few years ago at a cost of £1.2 million to the public purse, with planning condition permitting its sole use as a police helicopter base. Its closure would be a colossal waste of public money. The most notable and emotive involvement of our police helicopter in recent time has been the search for little April Jones, who was abducted from outside a Machynlleth home, and the search for young Cameron Comey, who fell in the River Towy in Carmarthen 3 months ago and is tragically still missing. Additionally, whilst the air ambulance had been called out to Monmouth, our police helicopter was first on the scene at Tirarchen Quarry, Llanybia, to rescue Luke Summerfield and transport him to Morriston Hospital. This is without mentioning the countless times the helicopter has been called out in recent weeks to assist in surveillance or arriving first on the scene to assist a little girl who was sinking in quicksand at Llansteffan Beach. It is impossible for me to list all of the incidents in which the Dyfed Powys police helicopter has been involved, except to say that the prompt response of our local helicopter crew gives innocent young children a fighting chance and gives criminals fewer chances altogether. The Police and Crime Commissioner for Dyfed Powys has himself been heavily involved in NPAS, serving as the Police Commissioner representative for the South West region on the NPAS Strategic Board. A Freedom of Information request to obtain the minutes of those meetings have left many people in Dyfed Powys saddened with their local Police Commissioner has sat in his hands and is allowing the Pembrey base to close.
For giving way and congratulate him for securing this debate. And I represent Ceredigion, part of the 4,188 miles covered by this invaluable service. Does he share, he used the word, I think, disappointment, but puzzlement. but bewilderment that in November we were given clear, unequivocal assurances that the service would remain intact. And yet here we are, several months later, with it all in doubt again. Does this not undermine the process, but also does question the commitment, as he sadly says, of our Police Commissioner?
Well, I'm very grateful for that intervention, and I will get to that point in particular in the next part of my speech. But as a Member of Parliament representing Ceredigion, he knows that the police helicopter from Pembrey will get to his constituency within the 20-minute timescale. He also knows, based on the current models by MPAS, it's very unlikely that the helicopter will get to Ceredigion within 20 minutes. So he's right to raise that very important point. Despite announcing in November that Dyfed Powys would join MPAS and would retain our helicopter and base, minutes state that when the new proposals were presented to the Commissioner, Mr Christopher Salmon and I, quote, was reluctant to oppose the removal of our helicopter from service. The Commissioner wrote in one of my local newspapers last week that he was powerless to stop the loss of our helicopter. His words are a far cry from his pledges to the electorate. His second election pledge in 2012, which was still live on his website this morning, states he will fight to save Dyfed Powys police helicopter so police can reach all areas. Mr Salmon doesn't pledge to save general helicopter coverage. He doesn't say he'll get the best deal for the area, as he appears to be doing so now in the press. Mr Salmon said he would fight to save the Dyfed Powys helicopter. With his reluctance to oppose the NPAS model, the Commissioner has broken his promise to the people, as the Honourable Member for Ceredigion said. I therefore like to take this opportunity today to put on record my deep sense of disappointment in Mr Salmon for his abject failure and apparent unwillingness to stand up for the best interests of the residents of Carmarthen, Pembrokeshire, Ceredigion and Powys. If the Commissioner feels powerless, then perhaps it's time for him to leave his job.
I thank the Honourable Member for allowing me to intervene on what is a hugely important issue to my constituency. But does he agree, Mr Crosbie, that the key issue is to have an efficient helicopter service? You know how important that is. And in parts of my constituency, for example, we'd be, certainly by road, almost 5 hours away from Pembrey, in parts of it, and maybe an hour and a half away from Harden. I mean, I just think when we look at the whole service, what we need to have is an efficient helicopter service that serves the whole of Dyfed Powys and not necessarily confined to an administrative boundary. I mean, there's a lot of other issues, but I think that's a key fundamental principle I hope that the Honourable Member will address.
I'm very grateful for that intervention, and it's precisely because of efficiency I'm raising this debate. If I thought the MPAS proposals would actually lead to enhanced coverage for the constituents, for my constituency and my constituents, I would be happy to support them. But the reality is, looking at what MPAS is proposing, my argument is we'll have a second-rate service based on when compared to the dedicated helicopter service that we have at the moment.
For giving way on a second time, but also he will appreciate that the concerns he is expressing, and many of us want to be associated with, are also the concerns of Dyfed Powys Police Authority themselves. They have expressed real concern about a diminished service.
Well, I think that's a very valid intervention, and that's why this campaign that's being run in West Wales by the Carmarthen Journal, South Wales Guardian, Llanelli Star and many other local papers is gaining such traction in our local communities. The Minister and the Home Secretary would be well advised to read the minutes of the NPAS Strategic Board meeting of the 19th of February this year and satisfy themselves that the decision to operate a 15-base model is not open to judicial review. One Chief Constable on the board states how it was, and I quote, virtually impossible to have effective consultations with forces in a region 4 days before a meeting. The Chief Constable stated it was, and I quote, highly problematic to accept an operating model without an understanding of the cost and savings distribution. The approved 15-base model, the minutes state, had not gone to National Chiefs Council. Even the Dyfed Powys Police Commissioner, whilst reluctant to oppose the new model, acknowledged that the agreement he had previously signed with NPAS had changed without him knowing. On the face of it, Mr Crosbie, it would seem the process followed to approve the 15-base model is on extremely shaky ground. On the weekend before dissolution, the Teesside Gazette reported that the Home Secretary had ordered a review of the NPAS decision to remove a police helicopter from Teesside and relocate it to Newcastle. Having seen the story, I wrote to the Home Secretary on the morning of dissolution outlining the strong case for a review into the decision to close the Pembrey base. One of my first letters in this new Parliament was again to the Home Secretary requesting a meeting to discuss this issue in more detail, and to once again press the urgent need for an intervention in this matter. I'm disappointed, Mr Crosbie, not to receive a response to my first letter. I have received a response from the Minister to my second letter, which arrived in my constituency office yesterday, and I'm disappointed that the Minister won't meet to discuss this issue. The residents of Dyfed Powys have been failed by their police commissioner and ill-served by NPAS. If the Home Secretary is not prepared to order a similar review as she has done in the north of England, then I believe it will be seen, quite rightly, as if the residents of Mid and West Wales are ignored by the UK Government. In his reply, to satisfy my constituents, the Minister must say that the Home Office will initiate a review of the NPAS proposals for Wales and Dyfed Powys in particular. The Dyfed Powys police helicopter has undertaken incredible work in our community and has been at the centre of operations, some of them heartbreaking, across the force area. The reduced NPAS model appears focused on more densely populated areas where the rural communities of the mid and west of my country looks to be deserted to them. If these current plans go ahead, it will signal a very strong message to Wales that our communities are an afterthought. If one police force needs a dedicated helicopter service, it is the one that serves the largest and most rural population in Wales and England. I would say the value of our dedicated helicopter service is immeasurable. To close, Mr Crosbie, I would like to quote a paragraph from a piece by former police officer and best-selling author Mike Pannett, who said of NPAS, "Cutting police helicopters is a charter for criminals and real worry for police on the ground that search for vulnerable missing persons on a daily basis. Criminals will act with impunity outside of the helicopter coverage and escape into the night, and the lives of the missing and vulnerable will be lost where every minute counts." I would implore the Minister and Home Secretary to intervene and ensure Dyfed Powys is able to maintain its base in Pembrey. Diolch yn fawr iawn.
The question is that this House has considered the future of Dyfed Powys police helicopter. Mr Davies, do you have agreement with the member in charge, Mr Edwards? Glyn Davies.
Thank you, Mr Crosbie. And I'm very grateful indeed to the honourable member for Carmarthen and Dinefwr for allowing me to make what is really a very, very short contribution. I mean, I want to congratulate him on bringing forward a debate that is of huge importance. And it's been a long-standing. He went through the record today of what the change is. And I remember being closely involved in the debate about the fixed-wing aircraft, which is entirely unsuitable for a rural area such as the whole of rural Wales, not just Dyfed Powys. And I think the reason I share this concern is how important helicopters are becoming. I mean, not only for police work, security work, but also for the health service. The Wales Air Ambulance has become a crucial part of the service's delivery in rural Wales. So it's really important, and I'm looking forward very much to the Minister's response to the debate. Now then, the one point I did make in an intervention, I wasn't sure whether there'd be a chance to speak, is that Dyfed Powys is a huge, huge area. And if you take a village that I represent, Carmarthen, for example, it would be almost 5 hours if one was remaining within the speed limits to get to it by road, and from Harden it would be perhaps an hour and a half. So clearly it isn't the same thing in every part of Dyfed Powys. And I do think, I'm just hoping the Minister's response will reassure me that if there's a new system, it will serve the whole of, I think, Dyfed Powys. I mean, I don't necessarily mean the Pembrey issue, but what concerns me is that we are limited in the helicopter service to a geographical area, to an area defined by an administrative boundary, not defined by ease to which the helicopter service can actually deliver the services to the people that it needs to. I mean, and there is an advantage in the new system. I mean, clearly it's going to be a 24-hour service, and it's cheaper. One can't discount the importance of cheapness, because the cost of the police service, if one's spending money on a helicopter service, then clearly there's less money to spend on what we all want to see, which is a visible presence of policemen on the beat. It isn't a straightforward debate, but I do congratulate him on bringing forward a debate that to everybody who represents Dyfed Powys and who lives in it, in south and indeed in the north of this huge area, will know is important, and I think we'll all be looking forward to the Minister's response. Thank you.
Minister, Mike Penning.
Much indeed, Mr Crosbie. It's a pleasure to serve under your chairmanship this morning. My first debate after being reconfirmed as the police, but now with crime as well, and organised crime. Minister, here in the Home Office as well as in the Justice Department. So you buy one, get one free, apparently. So it works very well. But seriously, on a serious note, it does work very well, being the Police Minister and the Criminal Justice Minister. Can I congratulate the honourable gentleman for securing the debate this morning on a subject which, if I was in his constituency and I was a constituency MP, I would probably call as well. And I hope he understands exactly where I come from on that point. But I am not an expert. I'm not a police officer. I don't believe there's one in this room either. Unlike the old days, Mr. Crosby, we would have had a police officer in the room, but we don't have one these days. And so I take my advice from the front line. And I will try and address some of the issues that was raised. Mr. Crosby, if you don't mind, I won't address some of the personal attacks on the PCC. I don't think that was appropriate for this chamber when we're trying to work together, and the PCC is a duly elected body, and when the elections come next time, perhaps the party political stuff will start then, who knows. But actually, at the moment, I'm sure he's trying to do the best job he possibly can for the people who represent the same as what we all are in this room. I give way.
Can I thank the Minister for allowing me to intervene, and can I thank the Honourable Member for bringing this matter to this debate this morning. As someone who represents a very rural constituency, Brecon and Radnorshire, within the Dyfed Powys area, I'd like to thank you for bringing it forward, because it is absolutely vital that we are discussing this. But would the Minister just like to say and comment on just how hard our Police and Crime Commissioner has worked to get benefits out of this system? From what I understand, this helicopter broke down, the gearbox broke down and had to be replaced, and was off air for 3 weeks, where we didn't have any cover whatsoever in Dyfed Powys. Under this new system, we would have cover constantly. And also, to finish your quote, the Honourable Member, escaping into the night. You did mention that we would, under this system, have now 24-hour cover, whereas beforehand it was just a 12-hour cover. So we will have, if anything, a better system and a larger coverage under this new system.
My honourable friend's been reading my speech, or perhaps he wrote it for me. I think it's absolutely right, and my honourable friend, in his comments, in his intervention as well as in his short speech contribution, said that we needed to get away from, which is exactly what MPAS has done, get away from the constabulary boundaries, the old-fashioned artificial boundaries that were there. And the truth of the matter is that, you know, the helicopter was offline extensively. It wasn't 24 hours. There will be facilities now. There will be more cover from North Wales, Birmingham, South Wales, and the Avon and Somerset forces will all be covering this. We've broken away with this new scheme. The old, this is ours, you can't have it, and if you do, it's going to cost you a small fortune. The police have bought into this, and I think it's a really important thing to be done. There are obvious and understandable concerns. I remember when I did the review of the Coast Guard, Mr. Crosby, and everybody said to me, you know, this is a very dangerous thing. But just because we've had it that way didn't mean that it was right. And actually, I think the changes we made to the Coast Guard stations has actually worked, interestingly enough, not least because we get more cover at times than we had before. It is not for a police minister or a member of parliament to tell police their operational duties, how they should run their forces, the sort of expertise they have we would dream about. I'll give way in a moment, but I'm very conscious that because the interventions have been allowed, I'm going to be cut off in a moment, and I did want to try and respond. But before I give way, if I've not answered all the points that was been raised by individuals because of the time restrictions, I will write and we will meet, because once we've had the debate, there's some logic about that rather than before.
Giving way and for agreeing to meeting. I think that would be welcomed in the communities I represent. If it's not the role of government ministers to intervene on strategic decisions by NPAS, why has a review been held into the situation in the northeast of England?
Minister. And I'll be perfectly honest, I've not had an opportunity to look at that, and I will write and find. It wasn't exactly where I was before, so I was responsible, but I hadn't had an opportunity to look at it. And like the previous minister that was in the chair earlier on, he was brutally honest, and anybody that knows me knows I'm brutally honest as well. If I don't know the answer, I will come back. There will be a review. It was due to be 12 months from when the scheme started. The scheme is starting slightly late. So my assumption, I will check and write to the honourable members here today as to when that review is. It should be 12 months from when it starts. So we've started in after Christmas, then that will where it will be. And it is flexible. The key to this is the flexibility of it. And as the police minister, I know the values of helicopters and fixed-wing aircraft And we shouldn't undermine the value of fixed-wing aircraft. I was a counter-terrorism minister in Northern Ireland. I have to be slightly careful about how I say we use fixed-wing aircraft, but they are enormously useful in policing in particular parts of this great country of ours. And we mustn't underestimate the fact that if you have 24-hour cover, you have that facility to fly anywhere, that actually that is greater than having something that's sitting on the tarmac at any base at any one time and not being able to be used. The police commissioners and the chiefs bought into this scheme, and I think they were right to do so. I have looked at the plan that the honourable gentleman alluded to, and I am comfortable, and I've been judicially reviewed before when I didn't expect to be, but there we are. But I am comfortable with the decision they have made. I've not had representations as to what went on at that particular meeting for me to have concerns about. However, you never know what's in the post in the morning, Mr. Crosby. I think what we have to be really, really careful about is that we look at the big picture, which is what my role is as the Police Minister for England and Wales, for the greatest police force, I believe, in the world, and I say this day in, day out, that they are the greatest police force, let down occasionally by some individuals and some people, but in general, we are by far the best police force in the world, and we police in a way that most other countries would love to police in, but we don't. And I particularly refer to the fact that we don't have a universally armed police force. The role of impasse is strategic throughout. And when they looked at this, they were particularly looking at how they could cover the gaps that has been alluded to when the engine failure takes place, the gaps as well as to when we didn't have 24-hour cover. And of course, they looked at the costs. It is obvious that we are responsible for spending taxpayers' money. That is why we are sent here, to monitor and be careful about how taxpayers' money is going to be spent. And the police forces looked at this, and they said that there could be a model. They looked at it again and changed the model again. I fully accept that there was a change of model, which is why the review will be in place. But I think, Mr. Crosby, what we must all sit back, and as motive and as difficult it is to say, this is the situation that's going to happen. Let's see how it's going to work. This is what the police are comfortable with, and the myriad of different roles that they're actually going to be doing when these helicopters are doing everything from rescue, even though we have other facilities that can be called on in this particular part of the world, in other parts of the country as well, but also, for instance, in tackling organised crime, in particular cannabis growing, which if honourable members haven't had an opportunity to see some of the videos that are available as to with the heat-seething cameras, so we know exactly who's doing what in properties being growing cannabis. These sorts of things, the helicopters are absolutely vital for. But Mr. Crosby, we all know helicopters are very, very expensive, and we must make sure that we're using them in the best way we can. If fixed-wing aircraft are suitable, then they should be used. As I say, we mustn't underestimate the capabilities of fixed-wing, but also at the same time that a helicopter moves at great speed. And a lot of the assumption is that the helicopter, for instance, would not already be airborne. They may have been airborne on an exercise, they may have been coming back from another operation, and the speed that as to what they get to in different parts of the country will be much quicker. Clearly, we need to keep this under review. Clearly, impasse have agreed to do that. I fully understand the concerns of individuals, but actually, if we want the police to do the job that we're asking them to do, we must listen to the police, and they tell us what they need, and then we react to that. I think it's been an important debate this morning, Mr. Crosby. I'm pleased other members have had an opportunity to attend, if not managed to get in. Half-hour debates are always very difficult. So difficult I've managed to gain myself an extra minute by actually congratulating those that have intervened as well. Key is not boundaries. Key is not individual constituencies or individual police authorities. The police authorities have gone now. The PCCs are there. I'm sure it was a slip of the tongue when referring to police authorities. I think that's a good thing that we have PCCs in place. We'll wait for the elections next year, which I hope the turnout will be much better than it before. They'll coincide with the local elections in many parts of the country, and people can see that actually what the police and crime commissioners are doing for in their community, and hopefully we can leave the politics out of that for a couple more years. Thank you very much, Mr. Crosby.
The question is that this House has considered the future of Dyfed Powys police helicopter. As many of that opinion say aye.
Aye.
Of the contrary, no. I think the ayes have it. The ayes have it. Order, order. The sitting is suspended until 2:30 p.m.
Grand Committee Room ident. 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 Grand Committee Room ident.